Your comments sent this channel after Sire twice. This time it's a different brand, and honestly, a messier story, because it isn't one clean flaw with one clean fix. It's two separate questions tangled into one base. Does the budget Sterling by Man Stingray have a real hardware problem? And does it actually deliver the tone its name promises? One of our own commenters answered both at once, unprompted in a single sentence, saying Sterling is the same as the real Man. Stingray is laughable, especially since Sterling had a huge problem with their tuners chewing the teeth off themselves. He'd owned 3 and didn't have any of them anymore. Today, is that a real documented problem or one unlucky bass? And separately, when independent reviewers actually put the tone to the test, does the budget version deliver? Two questions, two different kinds of evidence, and unlike some gear controversies this channel has covered, no single tidy villain and no single tidy fix, just the honest, slightly messier truth about what you actually get for roughly a quarter of the price of the real thing. A quick honest note before we start. Nobody paid for this video, no brand, no shop, and every clip from other creators you're about to see is used muted for commentary with the channel credited on screen. The links below are plain product links, no affiliate games. And because buying right is a method, not a list, the complete buyer's guide, every gold mine and money trap from this channel as one honest map, is linked in the description. Quick context first, because Sterling isn't one bass, it's a whole family wearing the Stingray shape at different price points. The entry sub-series around $350, the mid-tier Ray 34 and Ray 4 around $500 to $700, and the classic series pushing toward $1,000, all sharing the same core design lineage, and based on the accounts in this video, the same stock tuner hardware across most of that range. The tuner issue isn't confined to the cheapest model. It shows up on units costing well over £1,000 too, which is exactly why it's worth its own video instead of a footnote. Start with the hardware claim because it's the one that costs you money if you ignore it. A reviewer named Jai DePool bought a Sterling Stingray 34, and the very first thing that happened, before he'd even finished his first setup, was the tuners. In his words, they literally ate themselves. The gears just chewed themselves right out, every single tuner, and the bass could not be restrung more than once without them failing. He replaced all of them with aftermarket hip-shot tuners and said plainly, "This is not an isolated problem. One bad luck bass could be a fluke." So here's the second, completely independent account. A reviewer named Tom Longbottom owned his Sterling Ray 34 for 6 months, mostly happy with it, until he went to change strings, and the tuning pegs on the A&G strings suddenly went stiff, almost impossible to keep turning, to the point he genuinely worried something was about to snap. He'd found the exact mechanical cause, the spiral thread on the tuner post working loose from the gear underneath. He sent the bass back, the dealer forwarded it for repair, and the 2 tuners were fully replaced. His own conclusion, after searching for the same fault online, it certainly seems to have been an issue with these Sterling Stingray tuners specifically, not just his unit. 3 independent accounts now, all landing on the same detail. The tuner mechanism itself, not the neck, not the electronics, not the finish. One owner losing 3 basses to it, one reviewer whose gears chewed themselves apart on the first restring, one reviewer whose tuner seized until a warranty repair fixed it. That's not proof every single Sterling ship's broken. It's proof this isn't a rumor either. Worth 30 seconds on the actual mechanism, because it explains why this specific failure keeps showing up on this specific bass. These are open gear tuners. A worm gear on the tuning post meshes with a circular cog underneath the housing, and that mesh has to stay perfectly aligned every time you turn the key. Tom Longbottom's own description of the fault matches the physics exactly. The spiral thread on the post working itself loose from the gear, so the 2 stop meshing cleanly, and the peg binds or slips until, in his case, it eventually clicked back into alignment, only to repeat the same slip a few turns later. That's not a random one-off crack or a snapped part. It's a specific tolerance in a specific mechanical joint that, on enough units, isn't holding up to a full string change. Sealed, enclosed tuners don't have this failure mode because the gear mesh is fixed at the factory and never exposed. Open gear tuners, the style Sterling ships stock, trade that reliability for a lower cost and a more vintage look. If you own one, the 60-second check is simple. Change your strings once, fully, and pay attention to whether any tuner starts binding, going stiff, or refusing to turn smoothly through a full string change. If it does, you found the same fault 3 other owners already found, and the fix is well established. A set of aftermarket sealed tuners, Hipshot ultralights, are the specific upgrade both online owners and this channel keep seeing recommended, run somewhere around $50 to $80 installed, and permanently remove the failure mode rather than just delaying it. Compare that to a genuine warranty repair, which worked for Tom Longbottom but cost him weeks of downtime and a mediocre experience with the retailer's customer service along the way. Buying the aftermarket tuners up front, the moment you unbox a Sterling, is cheaper in time even when the warranty route is cheaper in money. Now the second question, and it's a genuinely different one. Does the budget Sterling actually sound like the real thing? A reviewer named Sono Giono put a Sterling Stingray Classic directly up against the tone the brand markets it on, and his verdict was blunt. No, it doesn't quite deliver the vintage classic tone as advertised, and in his words, he wasn't sure how he felt about being, quote, gaslit by Sterling's own marketing. He still rated it 3 out of 5 Olympic white Stingrays and called it a fair price for what it is. His complaint wasn't that it sounds bad, it's that it doesn't sound like the specific thing the box promised. A second reviewer, Johnny Dibble, ran the more direct test. A real USA-built Music Man Stingray against the Sterling Sub Ray 4, back-to-back. His conclusion, nothing gives that signature Stingray sizzle quite like a proper Stingray. But is that sizzle worth over £1,000 more? In his own words, he didn't think so. Worth being specific about what the gap actually is, because both reviewers describe the same thing from different angles. It isn't that the Sterling sounds bad, or thin, or fails to be a Stingray at all. Tom Longbottom, in the same review where he documented his tuner repair, independently confirmed the family resemblance is real. Bright, punchy, that same aggressive top end the Stingray is famous for. Present and correct on the budget version. What both reviewers heard missing was fullness and nuance at the extremes. The difference between a good copy of a signature sound and the exact signature sound itself. The kind of gap that shows up in a direct back-to-back comparison and mostly disappears the moment you're not doing one. That's the honest middle ground this channel keeps landing on with budget versions of iconic instruments. A real audible gap exists, and for most players in most rooms, the gap is smaller than the price difference. Zoom out for a second, because this pattern shows up constantly on licensed budget versions of iconic instruments, not just this one bass. A parent company licenses the design, the name, and the exact pickup geometry to a budget arm, builds it in a lower-cost country to hit an aggressive price, and the result inherits the real DNA of the original, while cutting costs somewhere specific to make the math work. Sometimes that cut shows up as a hardware component built to a lower spec, like open gear tuners instead of sealed ones. Sometimes it shows up as a tone that's close but not identical, because matching a legendary pickup's exact winding and magnet spec at a third of the price is genuinely difficult, not just corner cutting. The honest question for any licensed budget instrument, Sterling included, isn't is it fake? It's which specific corner got cut, and does that specific corner matter to how you actually play? So where does that leave a buyer? 3 honest scenarios. If you already own a Sterling Stingray and haven't done a full string change yet, do the 60-second tuner test before you need to gig it. If you're buying one specifically to chase the exact vintage Stingray growl, know going in that 2 independent reviewers heard a real audible gap, not just marketing hype resisted. And if you're buying one as an honest budget instrument on its own terms, not a clone, most owners, including the ones who complained about the tuners, still kept playing theirs after a $50 to $80 tuner upgrade, which remains far cheaper than the $2,000 USA original. Worth naming the actual cost math here too, because it's the part that makes this an easy decision rather than a scary one. A Hipshot ultralight tuner set runs roughly $50 to $80, depending on the specific model and where you buy it, plus perhaps another 20 to 30 if you'd rather have a tech install them than do it yourself. Call it $100 worst case on top of a sterling that already cost you a third to a quarter of the USA original. That still leaves you hundreds of dollars ahead of the real Music Man Stingray, with a tuner mechanism that, once swapped, has none of the failure mode described in this video, because sealed tuners simply don't expose the gear mesh to the kind of wear open gear designs do. This isn't a hidden tax that erases the value of buying budget. It's a known, bounded, one-time cost that most owners in this video ended up paying anyway, happily, because the rest of the base earned it. Two more practical checks worth running before you buy, whether new or used. First, if you're buying used, specifically ask the seller whether the tuners have ever been changed or repaired. And if the answer is yes, that's not a red flag. It's the previous owner having already done the fix for you, which arguably makes a modded used unit the smartest buy on this entire list. Second, if you're buying new from a dealer with a real return window, do the full string change stress test from earlier inside that window. Not after it closes, because a defect that only shows up on the first full restring is exactly the kind of thing that's easy to miss during a quick in-store test play and easy to fix for free if you catch it in time. 3 questions before we wrap up. Can you hear the problem yourself on your own bass? Not because a comment section told you to listen for it? A gap you can't hear in your own room, on your own amp, isn't costing you anything, no matter how confidently a reviewer describes it on camera. Is this a real fault or a sourcing lottery problem? A tuner that seizes on restring is a documented, repeatable design weak point across multiple owners. The kind of thing you fix once with a part upgrade and never think about again. A tone gap next to a $2,000 original is physics and cost, not a defect, and confusing the two leads to the wrong fix. You cannot warranty claim your way to a different pickup winding, and you shouldn't return a perfectly functional bass over a comparison you'll rarely actually make in real playing. And third, are you paying for the name or the sound? If it's the sound, the Sterling delivers most of it for a fraction of the price, and the honest gap that's left is smaller than most players expect once the direct A-B comparison stops. If it's the exact name brand sizzle, the specific feeling of a headstock with the real logo on it, no budget version, from any brand has ever fully closed that gap, and this channel would be lying to tell you otherwise. Here's the honest verdict. The Sterling Stingray is a real, well-built, honestly affordable way into one of the most iconic bass sounds in music, with one specific, well-documented hardware weak point worth checking for and budgeting an upgrade around, and one honest tonal gap against the original that no amount of marketing changes. Neither fact makes it a bad bass. Both facts make it a bass you should buy with your eyes open, which is exactly what nobody selling you one is going to tell you first. And it's worth saying plainly, this channel isn't telling you to avoid the Sterling. Every reviewer quoted in this video, the ones who lost tuners and the ones who heard the tone gap, kept their basses, fixed the fixable part, and made peace with the part that simply comes with the territory of buying a licensed budget instrument instead of the original. That's a genuinely reasonable trade for the money, as long as you know exactly what you traded going in. Have you owned a Sterling Stingray, and did your tuners hold up? Tell us in the comments, because this channel wants to know exactly how common this actually is. Everything mentioned is linked in the description, including the buyer's guide with a complete map of gold mines and money traps. Subscribe for honest, no-hype truth about bass gear, and I'd be genuinely glad to have you along for the ride.